Karen, how are
Hello.
you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Yeah, well, I know you know each other, Mark and you, so I'll let you start with this beautiful conversation.
Yes, Karen, thank you so much for being here. We were saying right before we hit record that you and I, the last time we saw each other was about 11 years ago. I was
That's
doing the math.
amazing.
I was doing the math during that introduction. So it's
That's
11
absolutely
years.
incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
Wow.
so
Wow.
we did a nonprofit, one of my first fundraisers for Retreat for Relief, which was money that we raised for people trying to recover from Hurricane Sandy. And I was looking for the best of the best speakers on Long Island to come and speak to the audience. And of course, you were at the top of that list. And it was a great talk that you gave that day and super inspiring for everybody that was there. So it's so awesome to see 11 years later that you're doing the exact same thing, and probably just touched a lot more people along the way. So how are you?
I'm really good. I just can't even believe that that's been 11 years. And it's just so fantastic to see you again. We can't go another 11
I
without
know,
seeing each other.
I know, especially
Definitely.
after listening to that introduction and realizing that, like, wow, we basically do the same work, and how that's just really cool. So tell me, or and tell our audiences, because I've heard this before, but I want to hear it again. Just briefly, like how this all started for you. I know you and I have the 9/11 connection, but you have such a unique story, so I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and there's nothing random about you and I even meeting and knowing each other. That's just how it works when you go with the flow and you allow, right? So
Right.
thank you, universe, for bringing us together. So my story is that I have an MBA, worked in business. I tended to be incredibly left brain and figured out how to do life the way that I was taught. You do this, and you take that step, and you do this. So I was working in um in corporate America with all the good and the not so good that went along with it. When I started to have children, one of the things I was observing about them is that they seemed naturally happy. And I don't remember being happy. So I felt like I had a responsibility to them to be happy and
Hmm.
not fake it. And
Hmm.
so I remember clearly like setting my sights on, I'm going to figure out how to be happy for the kids. I had not a good upbringing at all, and I had really separated from that. Of course, I had moments of peace or moments of in the absence of pain. We all do, but for the most part, I would not say I was happy. So I've set that intention out there, but meantime, I did not read a book or go to a speaker or take a class. I just said, I'm going to learn how to be happy. I've learned how to do everything in my life. I'm going to learn this one too. And if I guess you set a good enough intention, the universe aligns and lets it happen for you. So the next step that happened was that I live about an hour from Manhattan, and on the morning of 9/11, 2001, I had gone out for a run before I started work. And when I got back, I was punching the key code into my garage to get back in the house. And as I was doing that, standing in the driveway, my consciousness was experiencing what was happening in Manhattan. And I can't say that's ever happened before. I thought I was just having really creepy images or visions, which I'm not prone to. So that didn't make sense either. But when I walked into the house, someone was ringing my phone telling me to turn the TV on. And I turned it on at the moment that the broadcaster was making suppositions about a small plane hitting, accidentally getting off course. And I had this flood of knowingness that the broadcaster was wrong, and got information that I don't have any earthly means to, which over time turned out to be accurate. So for me, it was, having lived in the intellect and the left brain all my life, to realize that consciousness is not sewn into the physical body was a very dramatic shift for me, one that I was interested in. So in the aftermath of 9/11, living on Long Island, everyone was rolling up their sleeves. We had a lot to do. So
Hmm.
I didn't jump in right away, but what it eventually led me to is to discover that we have the ability to allow our consciousness to travel away from our body. They are not united, they are visiting one another. And when I learned to do that, And I was embarrassed because this was so unlike the circles of people I hung out with. So I was embarrassed. So I did it in secret, which meant that I didn't have anyone obscuring what was possible or teaching me any limitations. So on my own, as scientifically as possible, I discovered how limitless consciousness is and how eternally wise we are, and how if you scrape away the masks and layers of the human journey, how you can tap into an infinite ability to connect to literally everything that it is that you are seeking.
Right.
That's the short answer.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. That was great. So the first question that pops up in my head is, so I'm imagining as you're telling the story, that you had this experience, and a lot of people have had an experience like that, like just completely out of nowhere, where they had this knowingness, this like sort of a mystical experience. And then a lot of people just move on with their life. And then like one day, like at a cocktail party or like in an airport or whatever, they have a conversation, someone triggers that memory, and then they go, oh yeah, I've had something like that.
Yes.
But for
Yes.
you, it was like,
Yes.
oh no, this is going to change the course of my life. This is not
Yes.
something I'm just going
Yes.
to put aside and pretend like
Yes.
it's like, yeah. So,
Yes.
so why do you think that was?
Well, looking back in hindsight, it's easy to put some of the pieces together. At the time, as everything was unfolding, basically in slow motion, right? It takes a
Mhm.
lot to be patient when you're in an unknown experience. But in hindsight, I recognize that some of the events in my life, and probably some of the events for me as a soul, even before this human journey, allowed me to have the capability of wanting to learn how to be happy by connecting to universal wisdom, and then to teach it to other people, or not teach, invite people in to their own happiness. So I think that the universe is so infinitely knowing, and so are our guides, and they can help us to develop a path that brings us to our soul's intention, even if we're completely unaware that it exists. And so I do see that that's how things lined up for me.
Agris, I saw you nodding your head before when she was telling her story, so I know you have something to say.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned being in left side of brain, right? And then tap into right
Mhm.
side of your brain. And actually, Mark is witness that this is what I did this all weekend.
Wow. Oh, I
Like
love that.
I was messaging Mark and saying how important for us is really to unite those both sides,
Yes.
left and right brain, because left is concentration and right is meditation. So, and we are the ones who unite it
Yes.
and use it in our
Yes.
physical life experience. So my question would be how you, after being so much into that concentration stage,
Right.
like literally just experiencing that wisdom, that sensation, wow, that there is this so powerful, that side as well.
Right. Yeah.
And how to integrate that now, how obviously you are integrating, it's amazing. I call it contemplation, right?
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I would love to hear this.
First, I have to tell you, Agris, I've never heard it said that way about the meditation versus the concentration or the contemplation. I mean, I think it's such a clear way to express it. And if I steal it, I'll try to credit you, but that's amazing. I really like that. It is a good way of looking at it, a very good way of looking at it. It just simplifies all of this stuff. For me, when I began to I started to get a lot more downloads after the 9/11 experience, and it was 100% accurate, whatever I was getting. It was basically the headline of the newspaper the next day. So I was getting sort of a narrative that came along with those experiences, and the narrative was peeling back the events and explaining why they happened. So I got this knowingness of how people intersect, how challenges are experienced, how they allow the growth opportunities for humanity to get back to being closer to the vibration of love. I wasn't hearing it that succinctly, but I was getting this bit of, pieces of information. And when I was applying those pieces of information to my own life, it was helping me to, in parallel, peel back the uncomfortable happenings of my own childhood and to put them in a context of not being intentionally harmed, but to see that everything has a cause and effect in the human journey for the potentiality of benefit. And so as I kept doing this, I realized that it was important for me to have this street of communication be two-way instead of one-way. It wasn't benefiting me and could never potentially benefit anyone else if I was only downloading. So I wanted to learn how to communicate and have it be a two-way road. And so, little by little, I just figured stuff out. I mean, eBay was becoming a thing. I went to eBay and I typed in I diagnosed myself with ESP, right? So I've got ESP. Anyone under 40 has no idea what that means. So I put in ESP and eBay, and this little book came up, like how to develop your ESP. And it was from the 70s because nobody uses that word anymore. And when the little tiny book came in the mail, I just opened the book. I did the first exercise and never, ever looked back. I started to hear souls without bodies. And it was an amazing, amazing experience from that point on. It was challenging, of course, because I didn't have any context for what I was doing, but it was still, I moved forward. When I was connected, I was happy. When I was unconnected, I was more miserable than I knew I could be.
Yeah, it's, for me, it's just so interesting that we think that once we are connected to that extra source, right, to that download, to that awareness, consciousness,
right,
that we think, oh, now we, at least those who goes into spirituality, and I experience on myself as well, that they think that once they will connect, this is where everything will be sorted in their lives,
yes,
which is not even close.
No,
right?
it is not. It is not. No.
That's a
And
good
there's,
point.
yeah, because this is just
Yeah.
beginning.
That is just the beginning. That's exactly right. It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. Yeah. And then you learn to, little by little, just reframe the story of your life in a way that makes more sense and gives you more of that sense of comprehension and knowingness that things do matter, even when they were really challenging or nearly impossible. You know that they make sense. And you also know that you don't have to continue to allow or co-create massive challenges in your life anymore. That happiness is a way. It's a way of your vibration. It's a way of your being, a way of your intention and expectations and dreaming and integrating the right brain activities into your experiences. Absolutely.
So I have a question, Karen.
Yeah.
So this is a question that Agris and I get all the time, and I would love to get your insight on it. So people are often asking us, how do I know when it's my intuition or if it's coming from just like my conscious mind?
Yeah. And the clearest sign for me, and I teach this during intuition development classes, is that intuition comes as a pop. When you have that thought or that sense of, a pull, there's no line of logic or thoughts that appeared before it. Okay. And that's really the surest way. That's why if you're looking for a solution for something and you're, racking your brain at it for a couple of days, and then you go outside and pick some weeds, all of a sudden the solution is there because that's intuition. Okay. But when you're considering things and making choices and letting your brain do all that effort, it's generally not intuition. The second very clear sign is that an intuitive piece of information does not come entangled in emotion. So this is sometimes difficult for people to comprehend, but if I experience intuitively what we would perceive as being a tragedy, it does not come with any form of anger or sadness or disempowerment. It comes factually with comprehension, usually. Now, anyone's human history can write the story of pain and emotion to it, but when it arrives, it does not come laden with any emotion.
Hmm, that's interesting. Yeah, so when I'm like doing a meditation, usually I experience exactly what you're talking about. So I'll just be literally laying there, slowing everything down, you know, just getting calmer and calmer, and not a whole lot is going on. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, I'll just get
Yeah,
a word or a sentence or a song. But I have to tell you, it took a lot of training to get to that point, you know,
yeah,
because I, like you know, as open as I am to all of this, I'm extremely logical, and Agris knows this because we joke about this all the time. I don't, even as much as I open up to, you know, consciousness and all
uh-huh,
of that, my logical brain is always leading. You know, like
yeah,
and it rips everything apart and it tears everything apart.
yes.
I think that's helpful for me, you know, because it helps me to kind of balance it out. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
um,
Well, for me, and I think you can probably have a sense of this for yourself as well. For me, you know, if your primary tool of reference and establishing whatever you establish in life is using your left brain, then it's okay to allow it to be the center of your feeling of whether something is valid or not. So for me, just something that comes from pure whimsy or from philosophy, it's not meaty enough for me. It's not hearty enough for me. I need something that feels more tangible or logical or scientific or even mathematical. So
mhm.
more than likely you operate the same way because it helps us to integrate a discovery because we have validated it for ourselves through the intellect.
Right. Yeah, that's the fun for me because I'll get the download, but then I have to go to Google and like research that,
Yes.
you know, like just research it. It's like, it's funny.
Just so we're all clear, Google was invented for me so I could do exactly what it is you're saying, okay? The rest of you have the privilege to use it, okay?
But if you think, right, that concentration actually can be developed to the highest senses as well. Like yoga is concentration.
Yes.
That's where you actually use the tool to perfect yourself, to concentrate on certain things, abilities till you break through,
Hmm.
Mm,
right? It can be used in that sense as well.
mhm.
I totally agree. We cannot forego the left brain. We can't. It's a tool for us to be human. It's a necessary one. Without it, we would not have a relationship with space or time. We couldn't even understand the GPS as we're using it. So yes, absolutely. Them going hand in hand is what makes it possible for us to have a meaningful human life.
Yeah.
Yeah, this that and I think this was my latest realization, like because I was as well exploring spirituality, like trying to connect, and once you connect and you think like, wait, it's not just about connecting, it's really how now I'm going to integrate this everything. So I
Mhm.
have to concentrate on certain
Yes.
things, and it's funny enough that like I was experiencing as well, when I started meditate, like let's say a long time ago already, I tried to actually use concentration tool to meditate. And the best
Interesting.
meditation actually came to me only when I realized that I just like have to let it go. All
Yes.
that
Yes.
steps by
Yes.
steps, that
Yeah.
manual which are given for meditation, and then it's like, and once I let it go, once I just understood that in meditation, that everything just naturally appears. It is
Yes.
anyways, you think about this or not, and then it just
Yes.
I start to connect to that,
Yes.
like
Yes.
wow. So I was messing all the time with concentration, concentrating to meditate, and it's like was like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on.
Yes. Yes. No doubt. That's exactly right.
That's
The
the
let
art,
go and the
right?
flow it's the hard part. It really is the letting go and the flowing and not needing to be in control of every experience.
Yeah, I know that. I've definitely experienced that. So you touched on something when you were telling your story that really stuck out to me. And that was because I had a similar experience. So that was that you realized how unhappy you were when you looked into the eyes of your children, right? And you didn't
Yeah.
say those exact words, but that's the way I kind of translated. And so, and I had a similar experience to that. It was a little bit different. It was that my children were triggering me, and I didn't realize how much anger and sadness and all those things were inside of me. So in 2001, as you know, I was affected by 9/11,
Mhm.
and that was a tragic experience. And it took me probably about 7 years to heal from that tragedy. And I did. I can successfully say that I healed and
Okay.
integrated, the learning from that. And so now so now we're at like 2007, and then 2008 I got married, and then you start having children and everything starts to change. So for me it was like, oh, I'm spiritual now. I don't have the same problems that I used to have before I was spiritual. And
Right.
I'm healed too.
Oh, yes, of
And
course,
so
naturally,
yeah,
right?
so I'm good. And Agris and I have talked about this like at nauseum. Basically, it's a whole lot of pretending. It's a whole lot of pretending that I don't have problems anymore. I don't have strong emotions anymore. You just get better and better. The more you wear the mask of the persona as a spiritual person, the harder you work at pretending like everything is fine. And then
Mhm.
you have children. Either you enter into a relationship. Actually, it's any relationship, but in my
Yes.
case, it was getting married, and then all of a sudden like all the triggers that come along with that, and then starting to have children, and then all the triggers that come out from that. And it took me like maybe 15 years to realize it was even only this year that I realized that, oh yeah, I did heal from 9/11, but
Okay.
I haven't even started to heal from everything that happened before that.
That's it. That's it. Yes.
And I had never
Yes.
even considered that. Like I
Yes.
because all of that was repressed. And I didn't
Yes.
realize that, part of why 9/11 was so difficult to deal with for me is because I already had a ton of unprocessed trauma from childhood that I never learned how to deal with.
Yes.
That was coming out at the same time that I was dealing
Yes.
with this tragedy.
That
And
is
so,
absolutely right. That is so right. That is correct. Yes. No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have a frame of reference for the possibility of, peace within and expansion and joy, if you don't have a frame of reference for it, anything that's a little bit better than where you were is enough for you to say, I'm healed, even if
yeah.
you are unaware that there's a lot more going on behind that. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
So I know that you talk a lot about, happiness, positivity, and things like that. And so this would be a good, I guess, opportunity for us to segue into that, because on the heels of what I just said to you, I've realized recently that there are some flaws in a lot of the teachings about
Yes.
positivity and the law of attraction and all that,
Yes.
because I became so obsessed with that concept of, if I think happy thoughts, then I'm going to attract happiness in my life. But then
Yes.
I realized eventually that there were some really crappy things that happened in my life that were never healed. And those parts of me were also attracting things too, because those parts of me needed healing. And so now I realize, wow, there's like a huge piece of the puzzle that's missing. So do you agree? And if you do, and you don't have to, we'd love to hear kind of your insight on that.
Yeah, I'm actually glancing over here for something that I created to answer your question, but at the second I can't find it, but hopefully I will. Yes, I completely agree. I don't really actually I don't really use the word positivity for basically the reason that you outlined. It gives us a false premise that by having your thoughts turn to something more positive than what you're thinking, that you can emerge into being happy. And it's just simply not true. There's so much more that goes into it. I also don't use the term law of attraction for the same reason, because any school of thought or teachings of law of attraction that I've come across, mainly through clients, has left people inadequately, sometimes less satisfied than before they began, because it is not complete. It doesn't give the whole that doesn't give the whole story. So
Right.
what I have is, number one, I have basically what I call the formula, and it sounds a little left brain, but when you pull it back, it can really help people. And I've taught it to, thousands and thousands of people now. But what it is it's what you think plus what you feel plus what you believe. Put those in parentheses mathematically, plus the subsequent actions that you take equals your physical reality. So I believe that law of attraction teaches a lot about the thought part. A little bit they touch upon the feeling part, but they don't really delve into the action part, which, hey, listen, write the greatest screenplay of all time and you put it between your mattress and your box spring and it ain't going anywhere, right?
Right.
But the way that they look at feelings is incredibly limited. So when you really want to understand the power that you have to co-create in a more meaningful way your reality, it's important that you look at all four of those components. And often a starting point for someone that feels unsatisfied in one area of their life, whether it's their relationship with their body, romance, friendships, family, career, abundance, no matter what area of dissatisfaction they are repeatedly experiencing, what we do is we just look at that formula and figure out, what are you thinking? What are you believing? What are you feeling? What actions are you taking? Because there's going to be a hole in one or two of those in the formula. And when we can recover that part of the whole, then we can help them to move into a space where their physical reality is aligned with what it is that they believe that they want. It's interesting because before shutdown COVID, I was giving a monthly public group where people could just come and we could talk about all of these things. So I did it for about 10 years. And 4 years in a row, we did 1 year of looking at thinking or envisioning, right? The whole vision board stuff. 1 year we did feelings, 1 year we did beliefs, and 1 year we did actions. So if you could take a whole year to look at all of them, you realize how significant they are and how meaningful and deep each one of them is. For most of us, we can independently look at 3 out of 4, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what actions I'm taking. But the fourth one, the beliefs, that's where intuition comes in and is a helpful key, because most of our deepest beliefs we are unaware of. So we want to figure out how to exercise our own inner knowingness in order to find out what belief may be sabotaging what our intention is.
Wow. That's pretty crazy because, as a teacher, you want to figure out how to put that all into a weekend workshop, but it's just not possible,
Yeah. Well,
And
I've given 1 billion of them, and it's always a good starting point, but no, it takes a little bit more, and people will pick up the seeds of what they can. All right, I found what I was looking for. What I created and am creating is just a new term called Imaginism. And I'm using it in place of the law of attraction for people. And the way that I describe it is when heart, mind, and soul connect with imagination to create an expanded life, so that we can bring all of the components into it.
That's awesome.
I'm enjoying it. I really am.
That's the beauty of contemplation. Again, I don't know why it stays in my, when you said heart, mind, and soul,
Yep.
then it's like automatically heart is the right side,
Yes.
brain is the left side,
Yes.
mind, right? And soul,
Yes.
this is all we
Yes.
connecting together, right?
Yes.
It's just,
Yes.
and I really love to explore our abilities, actually our path, soul path, which we choose on this incarnation. And there is lots of tools, right? Like numerology, astrology, human design, gene keys, like lots of those which gives you that insight about our path.
Right.
And those tools, usually when they say it's not enough to learn those, because we think,
Yes.
oh, we got a reading, now I know, and then actually no, actually to apply this everything and really to integrate into our lives, it actually can take even 7 years till you actually fully integrated, if you really
Yes.
willing to
I
do
sometimes
that.
look at seeking, the idea of seeking. I look at it as, I just picture this big toy box and a kid that goes over to the toy box and sticks his head in there, and he's throwing that out and throwing that out and throwing that out because he knows what he wants, but this is not it. This is not it. I don't want to play with that. And so, like, this is that tool I tried. This is that tool I tried. I tried this one. I tried this one. And then all of a sudden, when you get to something that either brings all the others that you thought weren't working together, or becomes like just that magic key to unlock this information within you, then you feel like, all right, now I get it. And we all know tons of, spiritual teachers who have not integrated, and it's difficult to see the repercussions of them, attempting to guide people into a space that they have not yet experienced, because it's not a simple task if you don't really understand it from an integrated purpose point.
Actually spent most of this weekend thinking about that, everything that you just said. So it's no surprise at all that you'd say that here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, because sometimes I find myself getting frustrated, and then I have to explore that, because that's some other stuff, right? But yeah, just in terms of exactly what you just said, but I think that that's what life is all about, right? Everybody's doing their thing, and everyone's doing it a little bit differently, and everybody's bringing what they can to the table, and you come in and you sort of see, okay, this is what we have to work with. And then
Yes.
you just bring your experience, your voice, the expression of you to the table, and just create from that.
Yes. And I don't advocate for any one particular tool for that reason, because it's such a personal and intimate choice. And it doesn't matter how many discoveries you will, discovery tools you'll use before you get there. As long as the tool itself has the potentiality of bringing you to positive possibility, then I'm an advocate. Where I, veer away is if a tool that you're attempting to find this inner wisdom brings more limitations rather than expansion, then I will do my best to try to guide someone to a different possibility. And in very, very specific religions and tools within religious practices often do that, create more limitation for people rather than expansive possibility. That's just an example.
Yeah, because go ahead, Agris.
No, I just wanted actually to shift into this present moment and ask you, what do you think? Where do we stand now, the humanity itself, where we are, like what's happening? What's your perception?
Yeah. Despite the evidence outside of us, or the evidence that's being shown to us, I should say, I feel like we're really in one of the best places we've ever been in modern history. It's just so important for us to see that when a pendulum veers too far away from the soul and into the ego, we'll have extreme examples of the ego in order for us to align with some inner knowingness of what's not acceptable for us, or not only just us as individuals, but as communities and cultures and countries. So right now we might be in a little bit of an extreme example of the ego and what the ego does, and the expression of ego in relationship to wealth distribution, poverty, our relationship with the environment and plant and animal community, and most important is our relationship with each other. So the extreme ego representation right now is necessary for people to get to a state of discomfort where they choose to find another way. What's fascinating about living in pain is no matter what pain level you live at, like let's just say it's -100, If you live at negative 100, you are rarely seeking negative 90 because you are very familiar with negative 100. But if you drop down to negative 120, then you are incentivized by the increase in your pain level to move to a different space. And when you become pained more that way, you become perhaps open to a different suggestion or idea or thought or speaker or book or billboard or license plate or song. And the moment that happens, you start to realize I may have been trapped in my own misbeliefs, and I can start to figure out how to move toward a more favorable way. One thing I always find fascinating about, like, let's just call it enlightenment, I always find English doesn't have enough spiritual words for us to really describe any of this, right? But let's say enlightenment or awakening, whatever we want to call it. But when we move through a door, there is no going back. When that integration occurs, there is no way we can go back, because enlightenment is a one-way road, and it is the only way. So it's fun. It's funny to see, funny meaning not so great, but it's funny to see people who are on the other side of the door judging you on the side of the door you're in. And you know that when they come into the door with you and they cross through that door, they're going to look back at everyone on the other side of the door and say, oh, I'm going to invite you into this space because this space is truth, it's wisdom, it's joy, it's possibility.
Wow. I could tell you've spent a lot of time thinking about that, because that was very well said, I have to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I was
Actually, I
when
think it's the
Ag-
first time I've ever said that. So something you
well,
guys are doing brought that out of me.
I was like thinking when he asked that question, wow, that's a big question. I hope he never asks me that question.
You know, he's going to ask that when we hang up, right?
I know,
Please
absolutely.
record it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that just made so much sense to me. And you're right, you know, it's how things appear to be are not necessarily the way that they are. And also, like, when I think about, like, let's just take politics for a second. We're not going to talk about politics, but when we talk about politicians in general, and we see, like, you know, extreme versions of politicians and people's extreme reactions to politicians, it's like, well, you know, it's just allowing us, like, these amplified versions of everybody are
Yes.
allowing us to feel things so
Yes.
intensely. And when you
Yes.
feel something so intensely, when you have that high level of pain, as you said, you're just listening that much more intently, right? Because
Yes.
obviously, if you break your toe, you know, it's going to be a lot more painful if you just, like, scrape your toe, you know? So it's
Yes.
like everything is being amplified.
Oh, that's a great way of
You
looking
can,
at it. I like that.
yeah, because then we're forced to pay attention to it, and we're forced to have conversations, and they might be uncomfortable in the beginning. That's the thing. Like, we can't be so afraid to have those conversations, because it's the first time we're having some of these conversations
Yeah.
with each other. And we're not, like, you just said that so well. And so that's why I assumed you spent a lot of time thinking about it, but you said it's just because you're clear-minded, and that's another thing. But, like, we might fumble around a little bit in this conversation, and that's
Yes.
okay,
And
because it's
that's
the
okay.
first time we're having it. And then, like, it's funny because Agris and I go through this all the time, because we're always learning and integrating. And sometimes one of us will get so excited because we'll either get a download, or we'll have read something or talked to somebody. And you know, when you just get a concept, you just get so excited, you want to run to the
Yeah.
top of the mountain and tell everybody. And then when you
Uh-huh.
start talking about it, you realize you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, you understand, like, you get it, but now you have to put words to it, you know,
Right.
like, now you have
Right.
to, like, you have to
Right.
organize those thoughts in a way where you can communicate that to other people. So anyway, I think it's great, because I've said what you just said in terms of we're at the best time in human history, and
Yes.
people love to jump on that and say, like, you are just completely delusional, and that is why I stopped listening to you. I'm like, but if you just hang around for 5 more minutes, we could really get somewhere with this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. Absolutely. And you know, part of it is just really simple steps in your day-to-day life. Like, don't put blind faith in the media anymore. You know, that's so important. You know, seek the information about what is good and wonderful in the world, and you will find far more of that than you could possibly have ever imagined. So again, what you focus on will expand. So when you're paying attention to amazing people doing amazing things and great discoveries in art and music and just people expanding in their relationship with the environment, when you discover those things, they feel good and they're motivating. And then you see that there's 1,000 people behind that one and 10,000 people behind that one. And you realize the limit in what we are being fed through the media. So that's a choice. It's a choice what we feed ourselves in content with anything at all that we focus on. Many, many years ago, I learned to just simply rely on my clients to tell me what's going on in the world, because I really do not care anymore. The basics will get to me, but those are just stepping stones for the appropriate people at the right moment. They're not my stepping stones. What I am always aiming to do is I'm always aiming to be, can't remember what they call it, but behind the wings of a plane is this draft that makes a plane behind it use less fuel to get to where it was going, right? I don't mind cutting through that space to give that place for anyone that wants to fly behind me. And I'll just keep cutting through. But if I turn the nose of my plane around and look at how everybody's doing behind me, we all crash, right? So I look forward. That's where I go.
It's a very good way to explain it. And this is, I think, this is how you hold frequency in a sense as well, right? This is all we have to do, hold the frequency for others and just be that guide for others. And,
yes.
You know, I liked, and Mark, actually, you answered the question. Anyways, you said that you don't want that I ask you, but you answered the question as well. But about where we are now. But I really, what I heard from you both is that we are really in that breakthrough from illusion created by world leaders, by that really that, and this is, we can see just how that we become connected in internet, in different social medias, that actually you cannot hide anymore. Right. In a sense, you can ban many things, which is done even today, that this banned in this country, that banned in that country, but still people know how to connect and actually see other perspectives. Yes. They don't live anymore in that one illusion, that one perspective, and that's the beauty, what we can see, that this consciousness, what is available these days. I have this opportunity because I'm coming from Latvia, and at that time it was Soviet Union. So I experienced, like, for 11 years Soviet Union.
Yes.
So I know that perspective. But actually, it's actually that perspective. I don't hate that perspective, because it really is helpful for me to expand from that. And I had the opportunity to learn also Russian language, which as well actually is for me to tap into that perspective, to see what that side of the world speaking.
Yes.
So, and
that's incredible.
And that's, for me, is opening. I don't see this as a bad thing. So it's just like, oh, it's expansion for me. I can actually tap into many perspectives, and all I perceive is that everyone has their truth, and everyone has their right to have it. But and it's not my say to teach them how they should change their perspective, but just enjoy that there are perspectives, that we are living in this beautiful world, different cultures, with different people, with different things.
Absolutely.
To love.
Absolutely.
And that's how I perceive this.
Yes. Well, I can tell you I'm proudly part Russian, so I'm going to throw that in there. But one of the things I noticed, and you probably have a really, very expanded perspective about what I'm going to say, is that one of the challenges in the United States per se is that we have such a large land mass and such a large population comparatively to a lot of other countries, that we don't have, we've developed a strong sense of being ethnocentric. because we don't have a lot of exposure to other ideas and cultures. So we're really kind of inbreeding in these limited belief systems without any fresh air coming in to expand our thoughts or our imagination or our philosophical discoveries. But if you think about it, like even just like use Europe, because it's an easy example, you know, you can take a car ride and be in a different culture, different food, different language, different curiosities, different, you know, intentions. And then you can be in another one, you know, a few hours later. Like that's massive. Most people are taught to become either bi or trilingual. It's just a part of their process. And here, you come on, you go the same distance. You go from New York to New Jersey to Connecticut to Pennsylvania. It just doesn't move into any freshness. And that really co-creates this limited idea that we have as Americans.
But isn't it that, like, I can see from my perspective this, isn't it beautiful that even it's not easy to come here to United States? There's like so many restrictions, all those visa permissions, and when you get all that resistance, people want to come even more. There is resistance, you know, and this is actually how I see within us that we go where is resistance, because we want to explore that resistance. We want to see why there is so much resistance. What is that wonder about there, you know? This is how I wanted to explore USA, and I couldn't like come and live, you know, like in Europe, there is not even showing that you cross the border. There is a sign, you know, now you're entering Austria, or now you're entering Switzerland, whatever, you know. But in that sense, like, can you imagine? There is so much resistance that allowing to come in.
Yes.
And this is the most place where people want to come in.
I love that perspective. I never thought about it like that. You know, the two of you have spins on things and perspectives that I'm truly enjoying. I hope that we can stay in this call for like 36 to 90 hours, because that would be really suitable for me. So go get some food, guys. All right.
Yeah, that was kind of the impetus for the show in the first place, was just like, let's just have conversations. Like literally, that's where we need to be right now in our society, in our culture, in the world. I mean, let's have conversation, like all the stuff that's been in our brains for so long. And then you have your work, I have my work, Agris has his work, and it's like, in order to be good at what we do, we have to be focused, right? So we're only letting in, like you said, like a certain amount of information, but we always need to be, I love when you said the fresh air, like we need that fresh air to come in and talk about it and see things that we didn't see. Because, you know, I've said this before, but Karen, I'm sure you'll appreciate it. I grew up, you know, on the south end of Long Island, and the North Shore was like a different world to me. You know what I mean? Like
still is.
South Shore and North Shore, right?
I think there's something like it's illegal to cross the border of the Long Island Expressway, I think.
It's a completely different world. And then you have you know, New York and New Jersey. It's just funny. But anyway,
yeah, it is.
The thing is that the more you start to explore, the more you see, you just start to see things differently, you know, like, and I think that even Agris and I, you know, when we first met, our conversations were always spiritually based. And it was really just about, oh, I'm having all these crazy, like mystical experiences, and I don't know who else to talk to about this. But so I start telling him, he's like, oh yes, I'm having those same experiences. And it was like we forgot that we were from two different worlds, like that. I had my whole life and he had his whole life. And and I also, actually, before I go on, Agris, I was wondering, I was about to ask you, this just popped up into my head. Do you think that that thought process that you brought up before was the byproduct of what you experienced, you know, from living in, like, under that belief system for 11 years? Or did you have that before that?
No. The thing is that once you are restricted, and let's be real, you know, Soviet Union was made that it's enough within. Like if you look from that kind of that perspective, they said to their people, it's enough within for us, so we not even allowing you to go out, right?
Wow.
So you cannot actually be crazy allowing permission to go actually explore other countries, because it's not allowed to people to travel out of Soviet Union. There has to be really reason to do it.
Yes.
You know, and people was so desperate for freedom, you know, and that restriction what was put it on actually is like a driving force to get out of this, you know, just to explore. And for me was always that, even as a child, like I really want to go out and explore, you know, that gave me that passion for that. So there was a reason why I came into this country at that time. So actually I can experience and I have that passion to go out, to travel, to explore, to see different cultures, you know, and keep wondering about things.
Yes.
Which probably not necessarily the truth for other places if you come into that incarnation, right? So that's how I see this beautiful path of ours, you know. But when we come to that unity all together, like three of us, we understand that we are not so much different, right?
No,
Right.
no, I agree with you.
We experience same things, we have similar experiences, just from different perspectives, but we still feeling same type of emotions. We are craving for love, for all those things, and that's the beauty, you know. That's how we actually connect.
Yes.
That's that love is what can break any boundaries and make that unity. And I think this is where we are going as a global species.
I totally agree. There's 2 points about the things that you said. I love the way you expressed it. But one is that one of the early downloads I got, I used to get snippets of information, but one is that the one thing we all have in common on this planet is that we all want to be valued and appreciated. Okay. And when we see that commonality, it helps us to find the ways that we can connect rather than disconnect. And it's interesting because when I got that download 15 years ago, they didn't use the word love. Guides didn't use the word love because we don't understand on this planet what love is. So they used it in a way that we could personalize it. We all want to be valued and appreciated. The second thing is that the way that you explain exploration and your own journey from Latvia to here, what I think is always worthy of knowing so people can feel more adequate in their own path of discovery is that one of the fuels that we have inside of us is curiosity. You know, we're born with it. And if we learn to focus on it and we learn to pay attention to it instead of dismissing it or being educated out of it, then we can become more connected with our own soul's intention. So it's an exercise is just to really pay attention to what you're curious about and don't limit following your curiosity. You don't have to have an end result. You don't even have to have a goal set in following it. Follow it.
You're so right. We say this all the time.
Oh,
like,
you do.
permission to just wonder, and like we were two like giddy little kids when we made that, like sort of when we connected those dots, even in the past few months, just like, wow, whoa, there's so much power just in wondering. Like
Yes,
how are we not
wonder.
taking
Oh,
advantage of
curiosity.
that? Yeah.
Everything. I got this download, massive download that's been refined over years, but just of a school system that could actually work in public schools, where we strip away the way that we are educating children today, but even for even less money, because everyone's always concerned about money, but with less money, we can teach our children in a more soulful way that lets them stay connected to eternal wisdom and their own inner wisdom. And one of them is by far, it's to create a curriculum where curiosity becomes the fuel and not some other person's version of what we have an expectation of needing to know.
Yeah. But if you look even at astrology, you know, and you can see in the sky, the moon, you know, moon is our driving force. The moon just shines on certain parts and create shadows, but you want to go and explore whatever, you cannot see it fully, you know,
I
you
love
want
the
to go there.
moon.
And yeah, I mean, why wouldn't, you know, many people,
Yeah.
oh, you know, like it's darkness, moon, you know, whatever, it's spooky, but it's actually,
No, I
it's
love
our
it.
driving force and curiosity just to go and explore those things, you know. So
Mhm.
oh, this conversation is amazing. I agree, we could go for many hours probably, you know, like how we could call it. This is source special bonus 24-hour.
Yes,
24
exactly.
hours.
We'll do
Go
like
grab some snacks,
yeah.
grab a pillow maybe in case you need to rest your head, and get some water, and we're good to go.
Yeah, there's there definitely, I mean, I'm glad we're integrating that into the conversation because there's just so much value behind it. And I think, you know, we get excited as you're saying it. You could see both of our faces
Yes,
are
I saw
lighting up
both
and
of
we're
you.
smiling because it seems so silly, but we haven't found anything more powerful than that, right, Agris? Like this is where we are right now. We're like, yeah, there's like I love learning something new and then all the ideas that come from that, you know, and then it just never stops. Like it's always more and
Yes.
more like just and
Yep.
then another idea and another idea, and
Yes.
it's exciting.
Yeah. 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 There's one thing I've never permitted my kids to say, and I really wasn't a rules person, so it was more of a joke. I think it took them a long time to figure out it was joke, but I said to them when they were little, bored is a curse word that we don't use in this house. And it was just, I thought it was goofy, but I didn't realize the kids were actually going to think it was a curse. But so we didn't use the word bored because there's always something to become curious about. And the feeling of not knowing what to do next, it creates unlimited possibilities for you. I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this.
Right.
So that's always been a bit of a fun game for all of us. And when you do tap into those and you give yourself permission to tap into that, you can maybe forego some of the things on your to-do list and learn to play more, learn to experience the world right in front of you for all of its beauty and infinite vibrancy.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was actually a healing thing for me with board because I tied so much of my self-worth into my parenting and making sure that my kids always had something interesting to occupy their time with. And somehow that was a reflection of how well I was doing as a parent. So
Yes.
when they used to say I'm bored, it would trigger me like hardcore. And I would just be like, what do you mean you're bored? You know, like, and then, you know,
Yes.
you just kind of
That's
get
so
all
funny how
you get
personal that
all
is.
yeah you get all upset and then it took me a while and I realized that that's something that I needed to work on, which I did, and then I started to feel better, and it took a long time, and I of course I kind of wish I had figured this out earlier, but now when the kids say I'm bored, it also annoys them, but I'm like, that's awesome. Like, what do you mean? I just
Exactly.
said I'm bored. I'm like, that's
You put a better
incredible.
twist on it than me.
I wonder what like I wonder what's going to come out of this boredom, and then of course they just want to
Exactly.
punch me. But
What is my possibility here now? Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
Y-
But
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, there is one of the greatest gifts we have is to be ability to listen, and not listen just to others, but listen to perceive everything what is around us. So, and I think that comes from that when you're in a sense bored, like, but then you're like, okay, and you open up to everything, to that. I just enjoy this so much because that's one of my life themes, really, to finally to start to listen
Yes.
and just perceive and look to the nature, to the ocean, to river, to trees, to everything, into humanity, and just listen. And there's so much to be wondering about, and ask the questions and receive the answers within, you know. I think that would be my suggestion. Just listen. There's so much interesting out there. And within
Yes.
too. And within too.
Yeah, I would say inside and out.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and we've been training ourselves to the opposite of that, so I think we need to be conscious of that, you know, because we just have access to so much all the time now, you know. Like I used to long for simpler times, before all of this stuff came through. But I realized that no, it's just that we have to be more conscious of how we what we do with our time, like, because it's endless. Like, we could be scrolling on Facebook, and then we could switch over to Instagram, and then we can go over to TikTok, and then
Yes.
and then the radio and the this and the that, and it's like, so we have to pay attention to that, and we have to be conscious of like Agris talks about this, and this is how I want to finish up. I want to ask you kind of what your I guess routine or your method strategies for how do you tune out the noise, or maybe not tune it out, but tune in to your soul or consciousness, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I pretty much am never disconnected anymore. I'm not distracted by the human experience very much anymore. So I've adapted to that perspective, and I've adapted to, on some level, maybe being different than people around me, and it's perfectly fine. I'm good with it now. But on that rare occasion, and it's incredibly rare, but on that rare occasion when I feel like something curmudgeon-y coming up in me, there's one thing that I can do that helps me get right back there, for me personally. And I've explained this to a lot of clients, and it seems to work for them as well. So I'll share it. It's a good little tool. So I have, I love to hike, and obviously that keeps me connected as it is. But what I do is I have one particular place that I hike that I know is 3.5 miles in and back total. So I don't bring my phone or anything. I don't bring a watch. I just don't bring anything with me. But one time I had someone bring in a tool, that measures stuff, and they measured in for me 1 mile in this hike. And from that moment on, when I realized where the 1 mile marker was, I would go to this place to hike. And on my way in, I would let myself feel all the curmudgeoning stuff that I was feeling. I would let myself experience the confusion or the disconnect or the illusion. And during that 1 mile, I would say, all right, guides, I'm coming to the point that I'm going to hand it off to you, or ask for your more clear participation in moving me back to my own soul. And then at that 1 mile mark, I would stop, and I would listen to the birds, or I would listen to them, or I would do nothing, or I would watch a fern unfurl. I would just do nothing for as long as it suited me at that mile mark. And then I would continue, the rest of the way into the hike. And then I would come back the rest of the way and finish up the 3.5 miles. And as soon as I left that mile marker, I was at peace. I was back to being non-human, I guess. I was back to being my soulful stuff. And then the rest of the hike was just a pleasure and reinforcement and fun.
Wow, that's awesome.
Beautiful. It's one of my routines is when I wake up, I'm going for the walk. And first part of my walk, till I get to the point where I sort of stand, like you said, at the 1 mile, for me, there is one spot where I stop. The first part is just like, okay, let's walk. Like,
yes,
just
Yep.
physical experience, just wake
Yeah.
up, let's walk. And
Yeah.
you go to that spot and you're like, whew, and then you're like, whew, open up and let in whatever it comes.
Yes.
And then it comes, you're like, wow.
Yes.
And on the way back, usually for me, it's contemplating that together with my physical and that sensation which I just received. It's like, okay, now let's establish this within. And I come home and they're like, okay, let me message Mark.
You know what? I'm going to do that from now on. I'm going to come back from my mile marker, and I'm going to message Mark.
Yeah,
My marker.
we should set up like some kind of a message thread or whatever. Everybody could put in their morning message that they got on their.
Oh, I love that.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's what we're hoping to bring into the conversation, because we're trying to normalize that. That is probably the most important thing that you can do in your day. And I think that's what people at the beginning of this journey are curious about. Like, what does this look like? You know,
Yeah.
how does I want to understand spirituality. I want to tap into my soul, and I want to know why I'm here, what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And but some of us don't know where that is, you know, or
I agree.
and it should, like, that's why we bring you in, because it should look different for all of us, you know. And they're like, none of us have the right to put it all down on paper and say, this is how you're supposed to live your life. You want to be spiritual?
100%.
Yeah, like this is.
100%.
And
Yes.
so, but we
100%.
have these conversations, we just have fun in the process, and people are going to pick up stuff along the way. And
Yeah.
that's it.
I'll leave you with this thought then. When I was quote unquote becoming a public speaker, and I hated public speaking, but I just had something that I wanted to share. So I asked around and got some input from, a few public speakers. And the thing I heard most commonly was, number one, go get your hands manicured because your nails look like crap. And I never did that. But the second thing was, an audience can only learn 3 things, so never give them more than 3 pieces of information. And to this day, I have never done that either. I give them about 300 pieces of information, and they're going to take with them whatever they're ready for. And that's the way it goes.
I like that. Yeah. Because how do you know they might all be taking 3 things, but which part of the 300 are they
Yeah.
taking?
Yeah.
And you're all about expansiveness, so you're not going to limit your talk, right? You're going to just put it all out there and let them pick. So that's great. I love that. I like that a lot. Well, thank you so much. This was an incredibly enlightening hour that we got to spend with you, and I'm sure that we'll have to do this again sometime.
Oh,
So,
I totally. I'd be happy to do anything with you guys. I really, really, really enjoyed my time with you today. Thank you.
Thank
awesome.
you so much. Thank you.
We will see you, to be continued.
Okay.